There is a famous line from the Matrix where the oracles tells Neo, you have already made the choice. Now you have to understand it. At first, it sounds like a statement about destiny, but if we look closely, it points toward a much deeper question. Do we actually make our choices or do we simply experience them? Most of us assume that there is an independent I sitting somewhere inside us, evaluating options and consciously making decisions. We believe that every thought, every action, and every choice begins with this I. But when we start examining the process carefully, that certainty begins to weaken. Take any decision. Before it happens, countless factors are already influencing it. Our genetics, upbringing, memories, fears, desires, beliefs, habits, emotional state, and the situation we find ourselves in. Every choice appears to emerge from an intricate web of cause and effect. If that's the case, then where exactly is the independent chooser? Is there really a separate entity making the decision, or is the decision simply the natural outcome of everything that came before it? This does not necessarily mean that life is controlled by fate or that everything is or mechanical predetermined. It simply raises a different possibility. What we call a choice may be an event that emerges from the totality of conditions rather than from an isolated self. And then something even more interesting happens. The mind says, I made this choice. But does that statement describe what actually happened? Or is it a story created after the event? The feeling of ownership may itself be another experience that appears after the choice has already unfolded. If that is true, then perhaps we don't make our choices in the way we usually imagine. We experience them. This also changes the meaning of the oracle's statement when she says, now you have to understand it. Understanding is no longer about justifying a decision, it becomes an inquiry into the conditions that gave rise to it. Why did this particular choice emerge instead of another? What beliefs, fears, memories, and circumstances shaped it? But the inquiry does not stop there. If choices arise through cause and effect, then what about the desire to understand those choices? Where does that come from? The interest in philosophy, the urge to ask deeper questions, the curiosity about consciousness, the decision to investigate one's own mind, these two arise from causes and conditions. The movement forward understanding is itself part of the same unfolding. That means even the search for truth is not something a separate I decides to begin. The search appears just as every other thought and action appears. At this point, another assumption begins to dissolve. If there is no independent chooser, then perhaps we are not the author of our lives in the way we imagine. Life unfolds, thoughts arise, emotions arise, actions happen, choices appear, understanding appears. And throughout this process, there is experience. This often leads people to say that we are merely witnesses of our own lives. But even that statement deserves closer examination. Is there a separate witness watching life from a distance, or is there simply witnessing? The moment we say, I am the witness, another identity has quietly taken shape. Perhaps what actually exists is not a separate witness observing life, but the continuous movement of experience itself without a fixed owner standing behind it. From this perspective, the real question is no longer how do I make the right choice? It becomes how does a choice arise? And instead of asking how do I become aware, the inquiry becomes how does understanding itself emerge? Seen this way, life is not simply a story about free will or destiny. It is an invitation to understand the entire movement through which thoughts, choices, understanding, and even the sense of I come into existence.